Hi, this is Tapcat and welcome to my latest Q&A video. We have a ton of questions, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Gerardo Rivera Mendoza asks, what other video game genre do I like, even if I'm not good at it? And that was a really interesting question to me. It made me think a little bit. And you know what I believe I'm starting to realize is that maybe my taste isn't really defined by genres. Like even turn-based strategy or tactics, that's kind of what I'm associated with. And I do tend to like turn-based things because I don't have to rush all the time. I can kind of think a little bit. But the reality is there's a lot of turn-based games that I don't enjoy. And then you have games like Bloodborne that I just adore. So, I think I'm a funny one in that there aren't a lot of genres that I love. And what it really comes down to is I have to try a game and then it either I take to it or I don't. Because I'm drawn to all kinds of games. Like I'm always fascinated by stealth and survival horror and shooters even. But then if I play them, I never get into them. I have finished 2 first-person shooters in my entire life. And most of them I just bounce right off. So yeah, I don't know if there really is a genre. In days of yore, I loved sports games. And I also loved RPGs, but I would say both of them were very different then than they are now. Hunter Aldridge asks if I would be willing to do a campaign of Fire Emblem. Look, I'm willing to at least consider almost anything, but I think Fire Emblem is very unlikely because so little of the game is actual combat and so much of it revolves around, these conversations that occur in the game. I don't really enjoy doing a Let's Play on a series like that. Either they are voiced, in which case I'm just sitting here kind of letting a movie play out on screen, and I'm not adding anything to it myself. Or they're not voiced, and then I have to, do this constant reading for some RPGs. And so I don't really want either of those. I also don't really want to do like a 100-part series. And I feel like to do a Fire Emblem game, like at least 3 houses, that's an enormous game and it would take me a really long time. So it's not likely to happen anytime soon. Quentin Copeland asks, is an XCOM 2 legendary Iron Man run with no deaths possible? It is possible. It would be very difficult to pull off, and you would need some lucky breaks. There's no question about that. But if you play well enough and you get a lucky bounce here or there, and I guess more than that, you need to avoid unlucky bounces, right? Like sometimes you take one step in a direction where most of your squad has already passed through, but all of a sudden you trigger another pod. You just do. And now that kind of tips the scales against you, more enemies, more shots incoming and stuff. And it's honestly kind of amazing to me sometimes the difference between a flawless mission and a squad wipe is a lot narrower of a margin than I think most people realize. Like I've had runs through a mission that were very clean, but I also recognized that if certain dominoes had just fallen a little bit differently, it could have gone horribly wrong for me. And so, yeah, I do think it's possible. I think now, yeah, you did specify Iron Man. That definitely makes it harder, but it is possible. I think somebody who was good enough at the game, yeah, they could do it if they caught some breaks along the way. Meme Master asks if I would watch an XCOM movie. And I believe somebody else asks if I would watch an XCOM movie directed by Michael Bay. And listen, I would consider watching any XCOM movie, but I have learned from watching previous Michael Bay films in particular that, let's just say they're not to my liking personally. So let me put it this way. I would feel no obligation to go see one just because it was XCOM. Like, for example, there was an XCOM board game, and even though I was very into board games at the time it came out, I did not buy it because they basically jettisoned everything that I loved about XCOM and kept everything that makes XCOM frustrating and, less likable. And I felt no compulsion whatsoever to support that. However, if it actually looked like they had a decent story and everything, I would be down with that. What I would actually really love is if it didn't take itself too seriously, like if it was a bit like the old Starship Troopers movie. I think you could do a lot worse. Chemical Imbalance asks, how many pairs of shoes do you own? And I was actually kind of surprised at the answer to this because it's way more than I thought. It's 6. And that's really because of work. I work at a company where sometimes I have to get dressed up. Sometimes we wear business casual. But actually, in more recent times, they've even kind of retired that. But so anyway, in terms of shoes that I own because I want to own them, I have a pair of running shoes and I have a pair of hiking boots. And I wear the running shoes every day. And, a handful of times a year, my wife and I will go out on a trail and I wear the hiking boots. For work, it's pretty simple. I have one pair of black and one pair of brown dress shoes, and then more casual shoes, but still appropriate, for work. So if I ever didn't have to worry about that, I would only own 2. All right. Content Surprise asks about my favorite book. He says that he's always looking for recommendations. Now, I asked him as a follow-up, like what kind of genres he's interested in, because here's the thing. He didn't know this, but my favorite book will not be much of a revelation to anybody looking for recommendations because it's a not so obscure title called Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I don't know how many times I've read it, but every time I reread it, I'm just reminded how much I love it. And I just consider it such a masterpiece of economical and understated writing, to tell the story that he told in a little over 1,000 pages. It's mind-boggling. And frankly, I think most writers today could learn a lot from him. And I'm not talking about including elves and stuff. That's been done. Anyway, as far as recommendations go, he mentioned an interest in sci-fi. My 2 favorite, I would say sci-fi that I've read, the first is not obscure at all. So Frank Herbert's Dune, the first 4 books in particular, I think are phenomenal. I often hear Tolkien used as a reference point for George R.R. Martin and the Game of Thrones series. But I actually feel, I would love to know Martin's reply to this. I feel like Martin owes a lot more to Frank Herbert, actually, in terms of the way he writes and the way people have these schemes. And I believe Herbert coined the term wheels within wheels, referring to these schemes and things like complex plans that people had set up and complex political interactions and stuff. So anyway, but he did that in Dune decades ago. And I don't ever hear him getting the kind of credit that I think he deserves anyway. A very different sci-fi book that I also like a lot. I guess it's arguable whether it's really sci-fi, but that's Dream Park by Larry Niven, and very enjoyable. It's set in a futuristic theme park, and it also involves a murder mystery. So I enjoy that one a lot. There's a few sequels. I think each one gets progressively worse, but they're still reasonably entertaining. And horror was another genre you mentioned. So that's a tough one. I've read a fair number of horror novels. Most of them I enjoy reasonably well, but it's very rare I find a book, genuinely suspenseful. Probably my favorite ghost story horror novel, and one that I like an awful lot, is Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill. Stephen King actually wrote one too. I find most King books are more enjoyable and interesting than they are scary. But I think one of his lesser known novels is Desperation. And I thought that was pretty darn suspenseful. It has a nice supernatural angle to it, and I really enjoyed that one. So there's a few recommendations for you. I have no idea if your taste will mirror mine at all. I always am reluctant to tell people, just because I like a thing, Oh, you'll love it. Well, not necessarily because, what you enjoy in a horror novel could be very different from what I do. But anyway, those are a few of mine. And moving on, Blue Mercury asks, how do I feel about stealth games? Stealth games, I don't remember if I said this a few minutes ago. It's one of the genres that I'm always drawn to. I was really curious about Invisible Ink and Shadow Tactics, I think is the name of another game. And the Hitman games too. But I try to play them and there's just something about stealth. I don't like playing it. I can't put my finger on it. Mutant Year Zero is the closest I've ever come to that and enjoying it. It's not a true stealth game because at some point the killing starts. But yeah, I don't know why, but I don't tend to enjoy them. I wish I did. Lee Herman asks, what is the most infuriating game mechanic or ability you've come across in the turn-based tactical genre? And how about the best mechanic or favorite ability? There's a wide range to choose from on both, actually. But I'm going to say that setting aside bugs, because bugs are always infuriating by their nature, but I would say that in the XCOM games, and I guess anywhere else you see something like this, I dislike it intensely when the game takes control of my characters away from me. So for an example, in XCOM, and I have personally experienced this way more in Enemy Unknown than I did in XCOM 2, but when somebody panics and then whatever, they'll run and expose themselves to fire, or they'll fire at one of your own guys and potentially kill them. I mean, when you're rookies, that is a very real danger. So when they panic because one guy got killed, and then the one guy panics and literally kills a second soldier on your squad, and this is at a time in the game where you only have 4 guys total. So now you have one guy who's panicked and you can't use him, and you literally have one soldier left on the battlefield that you can control. You're basically at a squad wipe at that point, and not because of something you did, but because the game decided it was time for you to fail. I really hate that. It is the opposite of what I look for in any kind of tactical or strategy game. I'm looking for a chance to make interesting choices, but when you won't allow me to make choices, I'm just a spectator. So that's probably my least favorite. Very difficult for me to name a best mechanic or favorite ability. I think in a lot of ways, what pulls me into a game so much is if either the theme/atmosphere of the game really draws me in, like Bloodborne would be in that category, or if I can customize my characters, like City of Heroes was that way for me. So much of what I loved about that game had to do with customizing my characters. Not actually customizing it, doesn't even do it justice. Creating them from kind of, almost nothing. Even in XCOM, I wish it was more robust, but I love being able to customize my soldiers and stuff. That's not a true gameplay mechanic. But the reality is I don't think I can separate, I love turn-based, sure. But, within the game, I don't know, I love rapid fire and run and gun and shredding. If you just take XCOM alone, there's so many things that I enjoy doing. And then I guess beyond that, what I really get satisfaction out of, it's not so much the specific mechanism, but when I figure out a way to unravel the situation, it seems hopeless, but I start deconstructing it in my mind and working through it and then getting there. So I know that's not exactly what you asked, but that is genuinely what I enjoy most in these games. Umenzi Slanter says, what's the number one best thing you've ever eaten? And is there a story around it or favorite foods in general? I'm not exactly a foodie. My tastes are very simple. I don't really go to fancy, expensive restaurants or anything like that. Don't want to. But I would say my favorite, meal or favorite thing that I ever ate, there used to be a hamburger stand my mom took me to for as far back as I could remember. And they made hot dogs that were just perfectly grilled, and they toasted the bun on the grill so it was nice and crisp. and they made these great French fries, a perfect chocolate shake, like such a simple meal. But everything was just perfectly cooked and you got it hot. Like it wasn't fast food in the sense of things being pre-cooked. They always made it when you ordered. So I just loved going there all the time. And unfortunately, it's not there anymore. So I will never get to have it again. And most of probably my favorite things are in that category because unfortunately, when your favorite food involves some restaurant or other, either they change the recipe eventually or they go out of business and then you're SOL. But anyway, I went there not just with my family, but also later, like I took friends there and stuff. So I'll always have great memories of it because part of it was the food that I genuinely loved, whether I was alone or with company. But also, yeah, sharing that with other people was also great. And anyone I ever took there also really enjoyed their food. Dinner Fork Tongue asks, what's my current PC rig and what would I improve on it? So I actually very recently rebuilt my PC. I basically built a new one. But anyway, let me preface this by saying my PC was built primarily for video editing as my first consideration. It's serious overkill, particularly the processor, if you want to have a gaming machine. But anyway, I have an AMD Ryzen 3950X in my CPU socket, and then the GTX, the NVIDIA GTX 1080 Ti for my video card. So that was their top card one generation back. I was not tempted to buy one of the new ones, the 2080 Ti, because it's $1,200. And for the games I play, this is more than fine. One of the reasons I have that card is because it has, at least as best I can determine, a pretty powerful chip that will help with video rendering. I find it very difficult to get good information on that, by the way, those kind of specifics. But anyway, and then beyond that, I have a ton of different hard drives and stuff, but the boot drive is a really fast SSD. So, it's like basically as fast as you can buy, and that all of this helps to some degree. And then the other thing that I also added, not so much for speed, but for the first time in ages, I have a good solid hard drive enclosure for making backups. Because one of the issues when you run a YouTube channel, and assuming you don't want to just throw it all out there on YouTube and pray they never take your channel away or anything like that, if you want to have your footage, it ends up taking up quite a bit of hard drive storage. And just having enough hard drives in your PC to hold it all is one challenge. But then you got to find a way to keep that backed up. And you're way beyond cloud storage at that point, at least any easy solution. So anyway, and then the other thing that's kind of relevant for gaming, I also, at the time I rebuilt my machine, I bought dual monitors for the first time ever. So I got rid of my 4K setup and I have two 1440p monitors. Now, I don't dual screen the game. What I do is I play the game on one screen, and then on the other, I have my recording software open for both audio and video. And I love it. There's so many times where I would start playing something and I'd be like, oh God, did I start recording? Did I forget? And there were times I failed to record one or the other. I had to literally throw away a whole episode that I had played. Like I'd have to replay whatever it was from scratch because I had just failed to capture it. And that's incredibly frustrating. So anyway, there is nothing that I want to improve on it because I only built it a month or two ago. I'd have to go back and look now. It's probably been 2 or 3 months, I guess. But at any rate, I love it. It's great. Thanks for asking. Derek O'Neill says, when are you going to do a Shadow Tactics playthrough or Desperados 3? And that kind of goes in the whole stealth game thing. I tried Desperados 3 when it released. I downloaded, I believe they had a demo of it. And like I said, I'm always drawn to stealth games, and then I try it and I just can't get into it. Casper, I'm struggling with the last name. It's something like Verinen. I'm sorry. Anyway, He asked if I would give Divinity Original Sin 2 a go. And a lot of people have asked me about Divinity Original Sin. I've kind of talked about this already. This is one of these games where there's a ton of dialogue, and I do feel like all the people who are saying they would like to watch me play have forgotten just how much time in the Divinity games is spent in conversation, and how long it would take to play through that, how many parts that series would be. I guess if I did like hour-long installments, that would help, but I find it very hard to believe I'd have a lot of people with me by the end. So I'm very reluctant to do an RPG. I mean, look, I might do it at some point. It's not like I hate RPGs. I think the last one I played that I really loved was Neverwinter Nights 2. Kelgar Iron Fist is one of my favorite NPCs of all time. At any rate, Divinity is not going to happen anytime soon. Let's put it that way. Now, he asks another question. What is my favorite big cat? And that's a tough one because I pretty much love all of the big cats. He mentions his favorite is snow leopards. And I would not argue that choice because that was the first one that popped into my head. But I have to tell you, the other one would be tigers. I also am a real sucker for tigers. White tigers in particular is a variety that every time I look at one, I'm just like, oh my God, you're so gorgeous. So I do love the big cats. Dead Wolf asks if I would consider expanding my repertoire of games and show other XCOM-like games like Flashpoint Fire Rescue, Other Side, Gears Tactics, Jagged Alliance, or the upcoming Empire of Sin. So I don't really think of Flashpoint as a XCOM-like game. I've played the board game version of it, and I didn't even realize you could get it like for the computer, but I have thought occasionally about doing something like that, having kind of like an electric version of board games, as, you know, play it like once and profile different games of that type. Gears Tactics, I've talked about before. For me, I really thought they did a great job making that game. But I don't know, man. It feels a little bit like having somebody jam a cattle prod up your backside every 30 seconds when you're playing that. And for me, that got a little old. So I did not want to keep playing it. I played through Act 1 3 times on different difficulty levels to make the video that I did. And by the time I had done that, it had really worn out its welcome with me. So I'm not likely to revisit Gears Tactics. Other Side, I've also talked about. I just found the combat to be a little tedious. Jagged Alliance, I have not played. It's really old. I know that. I know it's well respected. At some point, I'll probably buy it and give it a try. I'm open to trying all of these games. Empire of Sin, I can tell you, is already on my Steam wish list. I had another one that's a little more obscure, but a similar concept where it's about, you know, these crime gangs or whatever, but really didn't review well from Steam users. Like it didn't seem like they did a good job with it, so I got rid of that one off my wish list. But Empire of Sin, I'm still very interested in. Calray Mist asked if I've ever thought about streaming on Twitch. I believe somebody else asked the same question about YouTube. Yes, I've thought about it. Yes, I've talked about it before. Very hard for me to schedule time to stream. And I feel like if you want to stream, you need to do it for quite a few hours and you need to do it consistently. I don't really have the ability to do either. I would probably just have to quit making YouTube videos and I would still struggle to do it. So I also don't think that I would be as good at streaming as in particular, when I take my time to make a more crafted video. But at any rate, I like being able to edit my content and get rid of, long pauses or technical screw ups or something like that. But that said, I will say this. I had very recently, like just in the last days, I had thought about doing streaming because I've kind of been taking myself to school on a game that I tried before and sucked pretty badly at. And I've been trying to teach myself, and get better at it. And I thought, I don't think I'm ever going to do a series on this. I just don't think I'm going to get far enough up the learning curve. But I wonder if people would be interested in a stream where, like I load a save or start a game from scratch, whatever. But, like if we try something and it doesn't work, we just reload. Like the point isn't to beat the game. The point is to learn the game. And I don't know. I've never really watched anybody stream that way, but I don't watch a lot of streams to begin with. So, let me know if that's something people, if you have an interest in watching that, maybe I'll do it at least a little bit. Like I don't feel the need to stream all the time, but that might be an interesting way for me to dip my toe in the water where it was a different kind of content. Okay, we do have a lot more questions, but I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here for today, and we'll come back for part 2 either tomorrow or the next day. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. I hope we see you next time.